everyone, and welcome to Time 100 Talks. I'm your host, Lolo Ganaike. Today, we're convening leaders in innovation who have created new and forward-thinking ways to improve our day-to-day lives, and they've expanded the potential in crypto, space travel, transportation, mobility, criminal justice, and much more. Today's guests are DJ, musician, and entrepreneur Steve Aoki, Executive Director of Criminal Justice Data Platform, Recidiviz, CLEMENTINE, JACOBY, CEO of the transportation and mobility platform company, Lime, Wayne Ting, and CEO of Relativity Space, Tim ELLIS. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our presenting partner, SABIC, for making today's show possible. And now, Time reporter Andrew Chow is here with Steve Aoki to talk about NFTs, the future of cryptocurrency, and where the music industry is headed.
Hey everyone, I'm Andrew Chow. I'm a staff writer at Time Magazine. And today on Time 100 Talks, I'm thrilled to be joined by Steve Aoki. He's a DJ, entrepreneur, producer, multi-hyphenate extraordinaire. Steve, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks. Appreciate you guys thinking about me, having me part of this. Is really cool.
Well, you've been such a pioneer in the NFT space over the last year and across different mediums too, like from music to your TV show, art. So I'm wondering which medium specifically you're maybe most excited about NFTs transforming and how you think that will happen.
I mean, like the first go-to for me is music, because I'm a artist, producer, musician. Like this, it's like this is my main love. It's my platform to express myself and connect with the world. But it's beyond that, really. It's going to be a utility, a token, a way of exchange. And I believe in the future, everyone will be exchanging NFTs in some sort of exchange of barter, just like currency, cash, the fact that the physical dollar is worth something, and that on your credit card, the digital of that dollar, you can exchange that dollar with a credit card. I think NFTs will become part of exchange, because the more and more people adopt the blockchain technology, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all the other crypto out there, and use that as currency and trade, NFTs live in that world. It will just become a token of trade. So that's what's exciting. I mean, of course, like, that's on the macro side, on the macro side, NFTs won't just be like, hey, that's like that crazy like thing that goes up and down, like things go up like crazy, like Shiba, and goes down, and people get scared, because it's so new. But just like anything that's new, if you're an NFT creator and you build on a service that the community supports and loves, then you will outlast the others. You will outlast this wild, wild west that's being created. But on the music side too, on like things that are happening and just on that platform, there's so many more ways that I think the most important thing is that so many more ways for artists to be able to monetize their art, and in this case, music as their art. And there are so many artists that I know of. And just like every industry, there's only a few artists that can really monetize it financially, be sustainable, and live their life from their art. Just like in anything, it's very difficult to get to that point. We're a service to other people. That's what we do. That's business. If you have a great service of what you do, you create value for the people around you. It doesn't matter if you're selling books. It doesn't matter if you're selling NFTs. It doesn't matter if you're selling shoes or whatnot, whatever it is, or service, marketing. If it's a great service, you're going to do well. And you have to always think about how to innovate that. And NFT land, you put that model in, the really interesting thing, the really exciting thing about this is that you don't have to follow anyone's guidelines. It is truly a Wild West. You are your own architect. You could really think, okay, you could really be Uber before Uber. Hey, there's no cabs around. Okay, I can do this. But you don't need this huge corporate institution to be able to fund your idea. You could start piecemealing things together, because the barrier of entry into the space is so low that anyone could jump in and be like, okay, I'm going to create this. And then with enough of a community, and maybe some people that can help you, you could really build this idea that will innovate the space and be a better service for the people that are interested in what you're doing.
Amazing. Well, you've had a lot of NFT drops over the last year. I'm wondering if you have any news you'd like to share about upcoming projects.
A few projects that I think are going to be really exciting in the space, and once again, different ways that are innovative, and also something that we can service to the market, service to the communities that are special and unique and people will enjoy. And one that I'm really excited about, and we already announced it this week, is my marketplace with Todd Mcfarlane, who's a creator of Spawn, co-creator of Venom, and co-partner in Image Comics, and just overall just an incredible human being with a vision of a world that people love, that he's created, and that we all, like myself, just I've dove into his world and just love what he's doing. And I've always wanted to work with him. We've been good friends for quite some time, and we're like, okay, this is something that resonates for both of us to create a marketplace, the NFT marketplace for like-minded individuals like us. Same kind of concept that he's created with Image Comics. You know, he left Marvel with a group of different artists way back when, you know, a few decades ago. And then he's like, we're going to create something really, really special for artists like ourselves, build our own world. And he's been doing it for 30 years. He's successful in it, and everyone has followed that model. And it's a beautiful model. I myself have been doing the same thing with Dimlock in music. You know, I started my label 26 years ago, and, you know, we're all about the artists. We've been supporting, we've released over 1,000 releases, and we have a very rich, bold, strong community in electronic music right now. We release all kinds of music across the board, and we put our models and ideas and philosophy together to create Odd Key Marketplace. And there's going to be stuff that we're doing together, collaborating on, stuff that Todd's going to be doing, which is exciting. I think for anyone that loves Spawn, he never sold any Spawn art. He's never done it in 3 decades. And he's going to be selling some really cool Spawn NFTs. So that's something that finally is an offering that's unique and special. And we're going to be inviting other like-minded artists, because it's for, you know, anyone that feels that they can have a place that they can grow. And we're going to help curate something really special for the Odd Key Marketplace that we're going to be doing together. And I'm also involved and partner in a TCG. So for people that don't know what TCG is, it's a trading card game. It's like probably the easiest way to explain it is like those Pokemon cards that people that play. They, you know, you set up a table, or Magic the Gathering. I'm a partner in our own TCG called MetaZoo, and it's doing incredibly well. There's an incredible community and following around it, and we dropped our very first NFT, one of one, on Sotheby's, called the MetaZoo Mothman, and it broke record numbers for us. We did something really special with that. With 101 card, 50 boxes of one of our sets called Nightfall, and the 101 sold for over $200,000. And there's a lot of excitement about where it's going, because it's first of all, it's the first time a TCG was ever in Sotheby's and as an NFT. So there's a lot of firsts happening right now in general. So that's what's exciting. And it's like opening up the doorway for so much that could possibly happen, to invite and onboard the TCG community that are not just players, but collectors. And now they can be a part of the MetaZoo NFT marketplace and world, and have that combined, the physical and digital, once again, combining into this space where it's a community that we're serving from MetaZoo. So we have the MetaZoo NFT platform that we're building out. We have a platform I'm building out with Todd, and I have my own NFTs that the Steve Aoki ones that I have a pretty rich, long, exciting roadmap, and with all my collaborations I'm doing. So definitely stay tuned on that. So anyone that's even interested in any of this stuff, I actually have a Discord called Aokiverse, where we discuss and talk about all the fun stuff in NFT land.
You recently announced that you're developing a series of shows in Sensorium Galaxy. And while I bet they're going to be amazing, I just have a hard time of believing that they're going to match the level of, enthusiasm that your live shows bring. For example, I don't know, like caking somebody in the metaverse is going to have this impact as it does in real life. So what appeals to you about, virtual concerts as a performer and a technology, and where do you see it going from here?
There's no doubt you can't match what's in the IRL. A show that I play at my my concerts, the feeling I get when I see fans really being expressive and showing their emotions when we're playing music and we're connecting over a song. I love being able to connect with strangers this way. It is something unmatched. That feeling of connection is something exciting when you can match with someone that you don't know and you're like, this is the moment that made you feel a certain way. And we're like, boom, it's like cataclysmic, like feeling of energy that goes. I mean, it just never gets old, which is why I love touring and I love playing shows. And I truly love this connective energy that's being happening between songs that I've made. It's just really exciting to be a part of and to watch. It's very similar to how I explain a chef that cooks something in the kitchen, but gets to see and like peer over a window, watching everyone enjoy their food, like going, wow, they really love the food, and being able to you go up and talk to them, how do you like it? Oh, it's great. I love this flavor. Like that is like a similar kind of like feeling to be able to be a part of that. And it's going to be it's very difficult to be able to have that in the metaverse, of course. So, IRL shows will exist. They'll always exist. But there is a limitation to how many people can see you. And I experienced that when I played in Fortnite. Okay, so I mean, because there are these early metaverses that weren't called metaverses, that people jump into an online world and participate in games. This has been happening for a long time now. We're all familiar with that. Like you go on and you play with other people like Fortnite or Call of Duty or any other game out there. And Warcraft, I mean, that's been going on for years. I was playing that in like the 2000s. And I remember when Fortnite hit me up, they're like, hey, we want you to play in the game in real time, live. Like, what? I'm going to be playing in Fortnite? Like, it's going to be a stage that they're going to build. I'm going to be up there and I'm playing in my living room in real time. This is so exciting. This is like the first time ever. And I remember playing in there and like, I was so nervous. It was really weird. I was like, I'm playing in my living room. There's like some production people. There's like a few people in the room, but like it was during COVID. So I was like, maybe, I mean, we had to limit it, but I was really nervous. And I'm like, after the show, I mean, it was a fun show. Obviously, like I was, because I knew how many people I was playing to. They told me the reach that it went across. They didn't tell me how many people were in the game, but they said that the reach that my set actually had was over 2 billion people. 2 billion people. The fact is, in the online metaverse, you have an unlimited amount of people you can experience something. You have people that might not ever see your live show, that can be a part of that. And so it's about enhancing what that experience feels like, looks like. Yeah, I think most importantly, feels like. Because of course you put on your Oculus or whatever it is you put on, you enter into this metaverse, and technology has been moving at a rapid rate, and especially during COVID, that all the technologists, all the researchers and people behind the scenes are like, we got to make this the best experience that we can, because we don't have a choice. We have to live in the metaverse. We have to Zoom. We have to do these kinds of things to function, because we can't really go out until it's a safe environment. So now you can do it with this unlimited amount of people. And like, it's just becoming more and more of a norm. And I'm all about you know, being able to do what I can to, you know, to show what I do to whoever wants to be in the metaverse. But I mean, please don't take away my IRL shows, you know, that's like my heart. But I really believe that as we get better with technology in the metaverse, we'll have a better, more fun, rich time, not just watching, experiencing shows, but like, you know, socializing. It's like one thing to like see a performance, but like when you look to the right and you're like, hey, I could have a conversation with this avatar and become friends with this person from all the way across the world. You know, you don't even know where they're from. They could be from like literally the middle of Europe or the middle of Africa, or the middle of Asia, the middle of like, you know, wherever. And you're sitting in your home in Burbank, California, you know? So it's just, it's exciting for that too. I mean, I think it's going to become more and more normal that we socialize in this metaverse.
Well, Steve, I look forward to everything that you have cooking up across the metaverse and other mediums. Thank you so much for joining Time 100 Talks today, and take care.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Next up, Time is spotlighting Recidiviz Executive Director Clementine JACOBY about how she's working to improve the criminal justice system through data. And after that, Time technology columnist Patrick Lucas Austin speaks with Wayne Ting, CEO of the transportation company Lime, to talk about how his company is changing how we think about mobility.
1 in 10 boys from the lowest income communities is incarcerated by the time he's 30. A child is 6 times more likely to go to prison once a parent does. 2 million people with mental illness are booked into jail every year. And so I think we do ourselves a huge disservice by putting this problem to the side. Recidiviz is a nonprofit engineering team that uses technology to help transform criminal justice outcomes. So we build data tools that are for the leaders and the staff of the criminal justice system that help them make data-driven decisions that improve outcomes. We're broadly trying to do 2 things. One is to prevent the number of people who are coming to prison. So for example, at the moment, about 1/4 of prison admissions are for something called a technical revocation, which is not actually a new crime, but a rule breakage on probation and parole. The other piece of what we're trying to do is shorten the length of stay for people who are in prison and better prepare them for the world on the outside. And so that means a couple of different things where data is critical. So on the supervision side, a lot of what we're doing is focusing on helping probation and parole officers see what people on their caseloads need and see things like a person who is eligible for early discharge from supervision because they've had stable housing and stable employment for many, many months. And this is a really nice positive feedback loop because by getting that person off of supervision, you're not only changing their life and their downstream outcomes, you're also changing that officer's ability to help other people who may need it more. So in general, we're really trying to reduce that over supervision. In terms of reducing kind of length of stay within prisons, a lot of this comes down to how can you help people earn more credit off of their sentence, or what programs are helping in particular 18 to 25-year-old men who are caught in the system. What can data show us about which programs and treatments and vocational trainings are effective so that we can scale those things up? Because right now, all of that is a little bit of a black box. We spend a lot of money on incarceration in the United States. And for every dollar that we spend, we generate about $10 in societal costs. And almost half of those costs are borne by family members and relatives and communities that haven't committed any crimes. And so to the extent that we can be improving outcomes for people who are caught in the system or avoiding people going to prison entirely, the societal benefits are really huge. So a couple of weeks ago, I got to be on the ground in one of our states and accompany one of the parole officers to tell a client that they were getting off of supervision early because of this data. And also, you know, not because of this data, because of the work that they had done. They had done everything right, stable housing, stable employments, and now, you know, they're going to be working to help other people as a manager in a sober living facility. And so that was really cool. I think there are moments where it can feel removed, right? You're working with the government on data, But the reality is that I think that this is the lever that we have to impact people's lives at scale. And I think we have to be working at scale on a problem this big.
Hi, I'm Time Reporter Patrick Lucas Austin, and today I'm here with CEO of the Transportation and Shared Mobility Company Lime, Wayne Ting. Wayne, welcome to Time 100 Talks.
Patrick, thank you for having me.
The pandemic hit Lime pretty hard in 2020. I know there was a dramatic drop-off in riders, over 90%. How have things been looking in the past few months as more people get vaccinated and start moving around cities again?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think clearly the pandemic has been a big, like I would say, demand shock for all transportation. I think if people didn't leave their homes, as it turns out, people don't use transportation. But what's been really amazing, even before this year, was that what we saw was after the initial demand shock, people really started to look for a single passenger open air way to move. Because, you know, I think we didn't quite know how it was transmitted at the beginning, but as it turns out, it's largely people to people. And the incredible thing is every single mode on Lime is open air single passenger. We're the world's largest operator of shared e-bikes and scooters in the world, as well as e-mopeds. And what it allowed people to do was to move around in a way that is affordable and also very safe. And so even though we saw a decline in things like commute and tourism, we actually saw a huge expansion of trips happening intercity. People taking us to go visit their friends or go to the grocery stores or go run an errand. And the incredible thing in 2021 was that the growth in intercity trips is as big as our entire trip in 2019. So 2021, we're going to actually end this year roughly the same size as 2019. This also means that we're really set up for, I think, a lot of tailwind into 2022 because tourism is going to come back and commute is starting to come back, even if it's not 5 days a week, hopefully 2 or 3 days a week. And all those things are going to be, I think, incremental gain on top of what we've seen in terms of trips on the platform over the next couple of years.
I know Lime recently expanded options like mopeds and scooter rentals in DC and NYC. Can you talk about how Lime is approaching cities, with its service?
Absolutely. You know, I think sometimes people think of Lime as a scooter company, and that's where we started, and I understand. But our mission is so much broader than that. We want to build a future of transportation that is shared, that is affordable, and most importantly, it's carbon-free. And we want that platform to be a true replacement for the cars. And so the way we're going to do it is so that, over time, we're going to build on new modes that have slightly different use cases. So like an e-bike, for example, people use it for slightly longer distances. If you want to go to the grocery stores and you have groceries, it's hard to carry it with you on a scooter. You can potentially put it onto the basket of an e-bike. And then a seated scooter. So I think about moped, it's just a broadly seated option. People use it for even longer distances. And sometimes you can put 2 people on it. And the idea is that you're going to see Lime innovate around modes. And that one day you can open the Lime app and go anywhere you want in a city like New York or DC and never have to touch a car. And that would be a place where we've truly achieved that. And one of the things, I think when we think about our core mission is around climate. Because if you look at the United States, the #1 source for carbon pollution is transportation. Almost 30% of the carbon pollution in the United States is from transportation, the bulk of which is from personal cars and trucks. And I do think we talk a lot about going to electric cars, and that's great. But the reason why cars consume so much energy is because it's heavy. The average car in America is 4,000 pounds. So when I use a 4,000-pound tank to move a 200-pound human, all the energy consumption is in moving the car. And so our answer to that is, how might we get people to use lightweight, energy efficient alternatives that are electric, that is shared, that is affordable, but most importantly, they use significantly less energy. And so this is how, when we talk to approach cities, we bring this vision to them. We talk about how we can help not only with equity and affordability and access to transportation, but very, very importantly, how we can help cities achieve their climate goals. And there is no path to achieving our climate goals unless we dramatically reduce our reliance on cars.
I know when usually the narrative for a shared scooter company entering a city is clashing with a city and, being a sort of public nuisance in the form of cluttering a city, cluttering sidewalks, and making it difficult for people with mobility aids like wheelchairs, get around. How is Lime working to solve that problem?
Well, first, I absolutely think, our approach to cities is very, very different. We see cities as our partner, as our customer, as our most important advocate in this mission to build a transportation alternative to the cars. Because when you talk to cities about their biggest challenges with transportation, they'll talk to you about affordability. It's so expensive. In fact, in the United States, the second biggest household spend only after housing is transportation, because you have to buy a car, because you have to pay for parking, because you have to get gas. The second thing that people oftentimes talk about is equity. Because if you look at where people have access to transportation, it is in certain neighborhoods. It is predominantly, oftentimes, in affluent neighborhoods and predominantly white neighborhoods. And you want to look at, a city like New York City. Before there was rideshare, where could you get a yellow cab? Very, very difficult if you're in left Manhattan. And one of the things that we've always held core to how we build our business is we want to deploy across the city into neighborhoods that are traditionally underserved by alternative forms of transportation that also meets their needs. And of course, we talked about climate change and carbon. And so when we go to cities, we are never adversarial. In fact, we go to the cities and we sit down and we talk about, what are your goals you as a Department of Transportation is trying to achieve, and how might Lime be part of that solution? And I think this is also why, if you look at the last year, a lot of major cities around the world have actually opened up their cities to shared micromobility options, whether it's New York or London or Paris. And Lime has won more competitive RFPs than any other player by far. And Patrick, you also mentioned this idea of clutter, and parking, and I do hear that a lot. And and I think that happens when something new comes in. And I do think one of our core mission is to build out tools, whether it's parking corrals or zones that make sure that if this is an area that a city doesn't want us to go into, we can block that off from access. And in some markets, we have lock-to technology, so you can't end a ride unless you're locked to a bike rack, for example. So we invest in technology to help solve some of these parking issues. But I also challenge the notion of it, because when you actually go into a city today, you actually look at how parking is taken up. It's not taken up by e-bikes and e-scooters. It's taken up by cars. In fact, 20 to 30% of our downtown, our cityscape is taken up by parking of cars. I am oftentimes tagged on social media, and there'll be an e-bike, and the person will be so angry, and they would say, "There's this e-bike parked outside of my house. Please come fix this." Behind it, 100 cars lined back to back to back to back. And they don't see it because we somehow have accepted that the litter of cars is acceptable in our streets. And so when people say to me, "Oh my God, Lime is in our cities and our e-bikes are on the street," frankly, there is no city in the world where we have more than 5,000 e-bikes. You go to a city like San Francisco, there is 400,000 cars in that city. And so when we talk about littering and what's taking up our city's streets, it is absolutely not because of abundance of e-bikes and e-scooters and green transportation modes. We got to do better. But we also need to challenge that notion that the cars have an inherent right to our streets, and we need to beg for what's left over. I'd love to talk to cities about let's reclaim those parking spots for walking, for pedestrians, and for green parking. And if we do that, I promise you, you're going to have fewer clutter, fewer challenges for people who are, visually impaired when we take out the cars, and we can open that space up for people and bikes and other forms of transportation that are actually better for the environment.
Let's talk about the hardware and software powering Lime. I know you've got some partnerships with other bike share services like Wheels, but I'd love to know what's powering Lime itself and its current generation of scooters.
Absolutely. So we actually R&D our own e-bikes and e-scooters. It's actually different than a lot of our competitors who buy from the same couple of Chinese manufacturers. And the reason why this matters is because we R&D our own e-bikes and e-scooters, we get to design it for the things that matter to us. And our latest generation e-bike, generation 4 e-bike and generation 4 scooters are the best in the industry. And we designed it first and foremost with the idea of how do we serve rider sensibilities. You'll look at the place where you stand, it's wider, our wheels are more sturdy, our acceleration is great, but we also design it for safety. One of the key things we looked at is visibility at night. How does it light up to ensure that when you're riding a car or a truck is able to see you very, very clearly? But most importantly, we design it to ensure that it is the greenest ride on the road. And I'll give you a couple of examples. One of the key things with our latest generation 4 is we want to make sure that every spare parts is used for as long as possible. And so one of the key things is we're sharing as many parts between our e-bikes and e-scooters as we can. So I can take out the battery pack from the e-bike and put it into the e-scooters. I can also take that out and put it into our future generation seated mopeds. What this means is that if a scooter or an e-bike dies, those parts could be reused into a next generation e-bike or a different hardware in that same city. And we also make it so that we have as little waste as possible. And the waste that we do have, we're trying to recycle as much as we can. I'll give you another example. So we actually partner with a company out in the UK where we're taking our old batteries, if it lasts, and we're turning them into portable speakers. And so because we design our own scooters, we're thinking about how do we reduce, how do we reuse, and how do we recycle and ensure that as little as possible of our hardware ends up in a landfill. And those are the things that I think really differentiates us. And when we go talk to cities, this is also a key part of what we talk about, the value that Lime brings to our communities.
Other competitors pursue both mopeds and e-bikes along with things like electric vehicles, cars, things like that. Is Lime going to make car rental part of its list of services it offers to consumers?
Well, here's how I think about it is, we want to build, our mission is to build a platform that is shared, affordable, and carbon free. And these are three things that really, really matter. When we talk about shared, if you think about the United States transportation system today, it is dominated by personal ownership. In fact, the average household has as many cars as there are adults. It's literally one car per person. If you look at cars on the street, the most common the mode of passenger is one person per car. One way to solve this is through what many, I think urbanists have been talking about, which is mobility as a service or MaaS. You can share that hardware across multiple people, which then reduces the amount of consumption you have into purchasing cars and scooters, what may be. So that is core to our mission. 2, affordability. We want to make sure that whatever we build is accessible to as many folks in our community as possible. That means that we don't want to be selling trips for $40, $50. We're hearing about cost inflation right now in a lot of transportation. What that means when you talk about that cost inflation is that there are communities you're leaving behind. There are communities that you're not going to be able to serve if those prices are at that level. So, we want to make sure that our trips are $3, $4, $5, which is what we're pricing most of our trips at. Finally, carbon free. Every mode on Lime is lightweight, it's electric. We look at the average carbon emissions very, very carefully. And if you actually look at it today, the average trip on Lime produces less than 7% of the carbon emission of an equivalent car trip. And we don't think that's good enough. So when I think about cars, going back to your question, Patrick, it has to hit those things. And I think today, if you think about a gas car, it doesn't. It may be shared, but it is certainly not affordable. And it is not green for the environment. So if we ever do a covered vehicle, what I promise you is that we're going to build one that is going to be drastically different than what you have on the road. We're not going to have 5 seats. We're not going to have a truck. We're not going to have an SUV because those things are not what is going to allow us to be affordable and green. And we're going to do something that is going to be great, but it's going to serve more communities and it's going to help us achieve our climate goals as well.
I know Lime is aiming to be a public company, and it seems like the game plan is more elaborate than, e-bikes and scooters. what can people look forward to in the next, maybe 5-10 years to come from Lime?
We actually have a couple of friends in the industry who are public right now. And the fact that we are bigger, globally diversified, better margins. In fact, we announced our second quarter of profitability, I think sets Lime up for a very successful public event in the future. And in terms of what people should expect from Lime, today we're a scooter, e-bike focused company with a third mode of a CETA scooter, but our mission is to build a transportation alternative to the cars. You're going to see us continue to build out more modes over time until there's one day you and I really never have to touch a car as we move around the city. I oftentimes say to people, it sounds crazy sometimes, is that when you talk to Amazon in their early days, when they only sold books and CDs, they were talking about building the everything store. They were talking about building a store where you can go and buy anything and they can ship it to you in 24 hours. And it sounded insane back then. And today I think our scooters is our books and our e-bikes is our CDs, but we're going to build something that ultimately encompasses a transportation platform, but we're going to do it better than what's out there today. And we're going to reduce the climate footprint of our transportation systems.
Wayne, thanks for such an amazing conversation. And thanks for joining us at Time 100 Talks.
Thank you for having me, Patrick. Really, really appreciate your time.
Our last guest today is Relativity Space CEO Tim Ellis, here to talk about the future of space travel with Time Editor-at-Large, Jeffrey Kluger.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey Kluger. I'm joined by Tim Ellis, co-founder and CEO of Relativity Space, the first space tech company to 3D print an entire rocket. Welcome to Time 100 Talks.
Awesome. Super excited to be here and chat with you today.
To start today, Tim, I wanted to ask you about a premise that a lot of people are simply accepting, which is that there's going to be a robust market for commercial, widely accessible spaceflight for people at large over the next 2 decades. How realistic a goal, how realistic a dream do you think that is?
Yeah, sure. So really right now, most of the market in space is telecom satellites. So it's about 400 billion per year or so in revenue today, which is quite significant. There's a few industry analysts that have a view that it will grow to over $1 trillion in the next decade. So the whole space economy really is growing quite significantly. And how we see it on the launch space, which Relativity is 3D printing our own launch vehicles. We have 2 rockets under development, one for smaller satellites, one that's a fully reusable rocket that's much larger. And we really see the entire access to space being constrained by how much launch supply there is. And in all of the views of the future, it's very, very clear that it's supply constrained. So we need a lot more launch vehicles, even with Starship under development, Blue Origin's developing their own rocket called New Glenn. There's all the traditional players from Arianespace to Vega to Soyuz to all these different launch companies, but there really aren't enough launch vehicles today. And so that's still the rate limiting problem for getting to space and lowering the cost of launch. And so I think really, as far as the next 2 decades, that problem is definitely going to be solved. But it's going to be solved by companies like Relativity, SpaceX, and others that do need their products to work to make this kind of sci-fi future a reality.
What do you see as the time frame for this? How many lifetimes away from where we are right now do you see humanity being a sustainably multi-world species?
Yeah, so I think at the current rate of tech progress, I certainly see we will land people on Mars in our lifetime. I think that's really, yeah, for sure less than a decade away is possible, although it's ambitious. I think it's really about who's working on technology that affects the rate of change of progress. I mean, that's why we believe so strongly in 3D printing a whole rocket. We have a 1 million square foot factory that Relativity is moving into. We've raised over $1 billion privately to develop this 3D printing technology for an entire rocket, because I think that is what's going to compound progress much faster. It really, if you look for the last 60 years, we still build rockets and aerospace products in these giant factories full of fixed tooling with hundreds of thousands to millions of individual piece parts, all assembled by hand with a very complicated supply chain. I think if that paradigm is still true for the next 60 years, it's going to take several lifetimes to really see 1 million people on Mars. And so it's really about how do we affect that rate of change and have automation and more software-driven manufacturing, which is really what I think 3D printing is, that will create the possibility that in just 2 decades, we could truly see 1 million people living on Mars. I think it's possible, but only if people develop this technology and more companies join making that happen.
Rocket design and construction has only become more complex over generations. It's become, as rockets grow bigger, they become more complicated, the construction process grows more complex, and Relativity Space seems to be the only company that is actually looking at changing this paradigm entirely. Not to put too fine a point on it, but you're alone out there. Can you really shift an entire industry?
Well, I think yes. Obviously, I'm confident in it, but I really think it's also about trying and going after a durable advantage. Like, what is the North Star? What's the inevitable future look like? I don't think in the next 60 years anyone's going to say, well, I want a product with more hands-on labor, more parts to take slower amount of time to build. And so if we can solve those problems, then we know that that's a fundamentally better solution. And I think really the shift from traditional manufacturing to printing, as I mentioned before, is really about automation. I think that's the unique view that Relativity has on it, is that very similar to what we saw with automotive, where for many decades, people are trying to shove batteries and electric motors into existing internal combustion, gasoline-based kind of platform and tech platform for building automotive products. The shift to electrification meant that the factory was different, the supply chain is different, how you design a car, and ultimately even the business model is different. But it wasn't until a company, Tesla, came along where they realized that the shift from gas to electric was a completely different approach that took a lot of different assumptions in building the company around. So I think it's the same thing with aerospace. Many people are doing metal 3D printing of bits and parts of a product. I myself used to work at Blue Origin, and I got to work with Jeff to start the metal 3D printing division there, in addition to doing rocket engines and stuff on the side, which was good fun. But after seeing that process, it was very clear that you had to start from scratch, because we really are throwing away most of the traditional factory and most of the way rockets are traditionally designed in order to 3D print a whole rocket. And we're very close to doing our first launch. So we've tested a lot of this tech on the ground, and yeah, I think are pleasantly surprised. I think it's very high risk and the odds of failure were quite high, but I did think it was worthwhile for someone to try. And here we are now with the world's largest metal 3D printers, and they're working.
When will that first launch be? And projecting forward, when would you see Relativity Space flying its first passengers?
Yeah, so our first launch is next year, so just a few months away. We've already printed the first flight rocket. So we have a launch site in Cape Canaveral, Florida, which is where the launch is taking place. And we've done about 700 engine tests to date. So all the ground testing of the engine is nearly complete. We're doing the final qualification right now. So all the pieces of this rocket, the first version, which is 85% 3D printed by mass, our target is 95%. So we'll, in future iterations, be able to print more and more of the rocket through continuous improvement in design. And then we also have a second launch vehicle that's fully reusable. We're targeting launch in 2024, so about 3 years away for that launch vehicle. It's 20 tons to orbit, so much larger payload and fully reusable. So that's really targeted towards larger numbers of satellites per flight, and we've already sold the first Terranars as well. So yeah, I'm super pumped about that, getting into engine testing for that next year as well.
And passengers?
Yeah, so we're mostly focused on satellites right now, so less on humans. I actually think we could do humans. I'm not against it at all. I actually just think it's about this idea that SpaceX right now is building Starship. They're wanting to launch people to Mars. I care a lot more about going after the mission of putting 1 million people on Mars, but focused on a different part of the puzzle. So for us, even though we're starting with launch, really Relativity's founding mission was to build humanity's industrial base on Mars. So once you get there, and it was really inspired by watching SpaceX land rockets and dock with the International Space Station, and then eventually send astronauts there. That's why I started Relativity, is I was really inspired by that and thought, well, gosh, after 13 years of this really inspiring success, there's not a single other company that's been founded worldwide that has the same mission of making humanity multiplanetary. And then I really was disappointed by other companies not going after such an ambitious mission, and really thinking, if we're talking about replicating a whole planet on Mars, we need a lot of companies working on different pieces of that. So we're focused more on the manufacturing tech fundamentally.
You speak about a lot of companies, and you spoke about that earlier. Are we running the risk of a field getting too crowded and sort of facing a kind of Darwinian winnowing of the companies, in the same way that we saw this huge swarm of computer companies in the 1980s, and a lot of them fell away and a few leaders emerged?
I think for sure, and I think, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's actually one of the great things about American innovation is we're a very high risk, take a big swing and big winner culture that incentivizes a lot of creative thinking. And I think that's very, very uniquely American. And so really having a lot of these companies developing, we're setting records every single year for private venture capital flowing into the space sector. So I imagine this year is going to be no different than last year, where it's higher and higher than it's ever been every single year. And so, of course, a lot of investments happening. I don't think we should have the expectation every investment is going to pan out. And I think that's okay. I think that's been the same with social networks. It's the same with companies like Airbnb. They're the winner, but I'm sure there were 100 different startups that were somewhat similar that all failed before that. And I think that's truly okay, because ultimately any of the teams that do fail, they're still taking tries at different ways of solving problems and providing value. And those employees are going to go off and join another company, or they're going to get a lot smarter, join another industry. So I think net, it's not a bad thing to worry about.
Getting back to that idea of the democratization of space, the idea that space will be something available to all of us, there's a challenge to that, because the physics of space flight are non-negotiable. You still have to tolerate high G's going up, high G's coming back down. A lot of people suffer from space sickness when they're in orbit. Even the Inspiration 4 crew, which was seen as the perfect example of how civilians could fly in space, still needed to train for 6 full months before they were ready for their 3 days in orbit. So will spaceflight ever be open to all of us, or is it always going to be something for the physically and temperamentally elite among us?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. The question there to me is timeline, because on the further future, it either will or it won't. And I really would love to believe in a future and wake up every day that it's going to happen and it's possible. And we're not just living in a fake sci-fi movie that never happens. I think there's a lot of urgency behind that in developing as quickly as possible and affecting the rate of change today. As I mentioned, I actually worry far more about the idea that taking away food, water, shelter, and boredom, which is really what makes spaceflight hard for humans, will over time, as AI and robotics get better, make it much harder to justify sending people to Mars versus just launching AI robots and other things that end up doing a lot of the kind of heavy lifting. So I think looking at tech growth trajectories, that's the one that gives me more urgency than an asteroid hypothetically coming and destroying Earth to going to Mars now. I think now is the time where people really can be the ones to do it. So yeah, I do think that it for sure is possible. I think the key breakthroughs are really in how to cheaply manufacture and have high reusability of launch. If you can do that, then sure, there may be a long amount of training, but at least the cost of the training and the cost of the launches per person will be far lower, which of course will open it up to space. I'm not a big fan of the kind of billionaire space race. I think the way it's been characterized is not right from my personal opinion. I think some of the suborbital tourism and flights to space, while I think from my perspective as a rocket person that loves rockets and space, I think it's admirable technically. I think it's interesting, but I totally appreciate the other perspective that this just looks like something for the privileged few. And I think we need to find a message that connects it way more to culture and what is the future and vision of humanity? What's being a human being all about? We invest so much more in going to sports games and entertainment and art and music and all of the things that make being alive as a person so great. And I think we should dedicate some fraction of our resources to exploring space and going out there and, kind of existentially learning what it means to be a human and expanding the possibilities for human experience in our lifetime. I think that really, to me at least, needs to be more of the message as to why do it.
Thank you for a great conversation, Tim. I learned a lot today about relativity space, and thank you for joining us on Time 100 Talks.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Jeffrey. And yeah, you'll have to maybe see our first launch sometime soon. So
I would look forward to that very much.
All right. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of today's guests, our Time contributors, and to you, our viewers, for watching today's episode of Time 100 Talks. I'd also like to thank our presenting partner, SABIC, for making today's show and important conversations possible. Make sure to check out time.com/time100talks to watch previous conversations and get Time delivered to your home by going to time.com/subscribe.